In this episode, we're going to punch a myth right in the face and hopefully not get beat up in the process. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? My name is Michael Sahno, and welcome to the Sea and Land Fitness Podcast. As I said, I'm your host, Michael Sahno, and this podcast is brought to you by Sea and Land Fitness, your one-stop shop for professional fitness. That's fitness that has anything to do with that's fitness that has anything to do with your job. If your job requires a significant amount of health and stamina and strength. So head on over to www.sandlfit.com and check it out. I'm going to have to work on that because we're broadening our horizons, so to speak, to encompass not just tactical fitness, but also everything else, everything that you would call occupational or vocational fitness. And I went over that in the last episode, so check that out. This episode is also brought to you by 511 Tactical for some of the best tactical fitness equipment. Head on over to 511. The link is down in the description. We're also brought to you by Thorne Supplements. Some of the best supplements on the market. They are third-party verified, meaning what's on the outside of the bottle is inside the bottle. And on top of that it is one of the top supplements used by nutritionists and dietitians. So check that out. We are also brought to you by RDX Sports. So RDX makes boxing gloves, focus mitts. They work in the boxing and mixed martial arts sphere of fitness, and I personally use their focus mitts. So head on down into the description and hit the link there for all three of them, for 511, Thorne, and for RDX Sports, and go check them out, help us out by helping our supporters. So all right, what are we gonna do? I got a little salty in the opening statement because we're gonna talk about something that is really interesting to me, because it's something that I thought and was convinced that I experienced. I'm going to have a sip of coffee real quick. Peter Madeira, this is for you. I have an essential tremor, which you just saw. So I switched to my left hand. All right. And I should actually do an episode about that, because it's kind of an interesting thing. It's a neurological disorder where my right hand shakes, which is hilarious when I go yes, I do go to Burger King and McDonald's. So it's kind of hilarious when I'm drinking soda from a straw and my hand just starts shaking in a straw. And my son, who's so gracious, he puts his hand on my arm and stops it. But that is, again, another subject that is not the subject of this podcast. The subject of this podcast is, are you ready for it? Seasonal affective disorder. SAD. So seasonal affective disorder is, let's say you're it's January, February. You don't want to go outside. You're feeling kind of depressed. You don't want to leave the house because it's cold. But but you're not pinpointing it. It feels like something that is bigger. Okay. It feels like something that is compressive. You know what I mean? It's coming down on you. Oh. And there are a couple of theories that I have about it. And there's some background information that I want to give you about it. So in my newsletter, I go over that in the early 1980s, there was a South African doctor named Norman E. Rosenthal, MD, doctor. So this guy was living in South Africa, temperate climate, really nice temperatures, usually year round. They don't really experience big variations in the weather. Okay. And he moved to the United States and he started becoming depressed and he started not wanting to go outside. He started staying in bed more often. So he wrote a book, Winter Blues, in 1983, which was followed by a research paper. And because of that, there was a change in what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM. So the DSM is used by psychologists to diagnose you. Okay. And in the 90s, there was a lot of, support for this. There was a lot of there was a big movement towards, actually, I'm going to tell you, there was a big movement to diagnose us with everything. If you notice, what was it? ADD, attention deficit disorder, came about in the late 80s and the 90s. So there was a big boom in mental health that was also, and I'm not being conspiratorial, this happened. It just happened. I'm not saying one's causative. I'm just saying that there's a correlation. A correlation means things happened in the same room. Okay. There was a correlation between a lot of people in I would call it the psychology industry, because it is an industry, because there is work between, and this is actually a real thing, and it's interesting. So there is work between researchers who are looking for funding and coming up with novel, new ideas for why people act a certain way. So they'll write a research paper. There will be consensus or a group nod. Yeah, that sounds valid. And then once that group nod happens, it goes to a round table, literally a table with a group of people. And then that gets put into the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM. And then from there, they lobby the insurance companies to have a code implemented for this new disorder that's put into the book, the DSM. And then once a code gets put in, or what they perceive as a valid reason for this type of behavior, what they see as a valid reason for this behavior to be included into their mental health Bible, which is the DSM, they then go to insurance companies, and insurance companies, pay out. And my opinion on seasonal affective disorder is that it is Bullshit. Straight up. I think it's bullshit. I think the disorder is bullshit. And I'm going to clarify all of this. So there was, and back to my newsletter, because I did a little bit of research in this for the newsletter. There was a paper by Megan K. I'm going to slaughter this name. Trafanstead, Sheila Meda, and Stephen G. Lobello. Okay. And in 2016, they wrote a paper, and they did a deep dive into this paper, into this subject, and released a paper called Major Depression with Seasonal Variation. Is it a valid construct? And I'm going to read you what I wrote in the newsletter. In their research, they found that depression was unrelated to latitude, season, or sunlight, and that results do not support the validity of a seasonal modifier in major depression. So basically what that's saying is that there's nothing to support that a season or whatever latitude you live in, the farther north, the more depressed you get, or sunlight has any effect on depression. That's not to say sunlight doesn't have an effect on mood. So there is, you go out in the sun and you absorb the sunlight, and the end result is that you feel better. There's a long process to that, and I'm going to do an entire episode on why that happens. And so basically what they said is that this is just garbage. And I mean, there is such a thing as vitamin B deficiency. You know what I mean? And we know that because that is something that has to do with sunlight. So it does affect the mood. So what am I saying? Am I saying that on the one hand, it looks like I'm saying, yes, it does, and then no, it doesn't. Okay. So vitamin B does have an effect on your mood, but it is not the only thing that keeps you from being in a good mood. There are a lot of things that can counteract low levels of vitamin B: exercise, being outside, having the fortitude to get yourself up out of bed. Basically, what the paper is saying is that we're not saying that depression's not real. All we're saying is that the environmental aspects that deal with seasonal, where you live on the planet, and sunlight are not major causatives. They do not cause depression. Okay. And the other thing that gets me is that if you are clinically depressed, you're not depressed in the summer and then depressed in the winter. There are cyclical aspects to depression, but those cyclical aspects don't stop at the winter solstice and then, your depression kicks in. So I have an interesting theory about it. So, and here's my theory, and this is where it gets weird. And I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. And I'm okay with that. But I like looking at, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what I love. I like simple. Occam's razor. The most likely thing is the most likely thing. Hold on just 1 second. More coffee. All right. So if we're looking at it And we're seeing that there is some type of, in some people, a more pronounced instance, or there are times in your life, or I'm getting this, I'm slaughtering this. I'm not doing a good job explaining this. So let's say in the wintertime, you are more depressed. Let's say in the wintertime, one of the things that they found in Vermont is, because I used to live up in Vermont, is that wintertime has I was told this, I don't know if it's true, but I was told that in the wintertime, there's more instances of alcoholism, that there are more instances of domestic violence. So you hear a lot about this in Vermont, but you also hear about this in Alaska. So do we go through cyclical behaviors throughout the year? I would honestly argue probably yes. But then I would challenge to say that that's not a disorder. So I don't think that's a disorder. I think it is an aspect of living in the wrong places. If you look at the progression of evolution, and you look at how people traveled, there are some really great graphs and maps that show the travels of man throughout our evolutionary history and where they went. And I think they're fascinating. And you look at the biological changes that occur in humans as they made these travels, the adaptations, evolutionary adaptations that people had. This is going way into the weeds, I know. But you look at, red hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, and when we look at the things that occurred over time in our species as we traveled, these things developed because they kept us alive. That's it. Not because we were great, blonde haired, blue eyed, this, or, whatever. Not because it's simple. It's KISS. It's keep it simple, stupid. These things happened at some point. People with blue eyes were able to survive better in the cold. Now, a person with blonde and blue eyes isn't going to survive better in, the Mediterranean, because they're going to get sunburned. It happens to my wife all the time. She's Irish and she's very fair. My son, oddly, is also very fair, but I have dark features, so he tans. So it's really interesting, all these evolutionary developments that occurred. Now, where am I going with all this? We, as a species now, live wherever the hell we want. We have the ability, financially, unlike back 1,000 years ago, to just pick up and move our entire family from, Texas to Montana for a job. And this forcing of environmental conditions on bodies that are not able to deal with it is going to cause biological interrupt. It's going to cause some people to deal with it well and some people to not deal with it well. And I actually think that if we were able to look across the population and take certain identifiers, and look at them and say, wow, it's really interesting. I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. There could be not much of a difference between someone whose family historically came from Iceland and someone whose family historically, like mine, came from Texas, going all the way back to Tejanos. Uh, so, I don't do well in the cold. I used to as a kid, but I think I was a lot more resilient as a kid. And as I grew older, my body couldn't keep up with the physiological demands, the environmental demands they were putting on my physiology, on my body. But I could just be being a wuss too. You know what I mean? So that blows my theory right out of the water. But I'm okay to be wrong. It's okay. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. What I did find, though, was an interesting story that I don't know how to put into this. All right. So there's a place in Western Japan called Mount Roko. And when was this? This was in October of, when was this? October 2006. This guy, Mitsutaka Uchikoshi, he went on a hike with and this sucks. This story sucks. This guy went on a hike as part of his job. Like it was people at where he works, they all went out together, and he got left on the mountain. He got hurt and got left. So that job sucks. Quit that job immediately. But he was up there for 24 days without food or water. His body got down to 72 degrees, 98.6, all the way down to 72 degrees. And he survived. Now, there are a lot of people who believe, and on top of that, he had barely had a pulse, and he was experiencing multiple organ failure and blood loss. And the doctors that were treating him had no other explanation of how he survived other than to think that perhaps he went into hibernation. And it was thought that only, certain animals like possums and bears, squirrels, not all species of squirrels, but raccoons that he was hibernating. There are a lot of people who have dismissed that idea, but there is really no other way to kind of account for him still being alive. And he made pretty much 100% recovery. So the reason I bring that up is because maybe that's where we get this feeling of not wanting to be in the cold, that we have this kind of, once the cold temperatures come, the reason we want to stay in bed, the reason we don't want to be up and around is because we have our ancestors on our evolutionary family tree were hibernators at some point, and we still have that gene that kicks up and makes us feel like crap. So, but my whole point is that I don't believe that seasonal affective disorder is a disorder. I do feel that there is a behavioral change that occurs when it gets cold because I experience it. I'm not depressed. I don't have depression. But I dread the winter coming. And I actually, over the past couple of years, have not worked out in the winter, just done cardio, because I just don't enjoy it in the wintertime. I keep trying to get my wife to move farther south, but she keeps telling me not with her job. So what are you going to do? It's all right. No big deal. But, and it affects a lot of us. The cold affects a lot of us. So I will never discount that the cold affects you. I will just say it's not a disorder. It's just something we got to push through. And because of that, one of the psychological skills and tools that I use is I tell myself, hey man, winter's almost over. So you should tell yourself that too. All right. That is it. And that was pretty much like a ramble. I feel like I was rambling for 20 some odd minutes. I hope it made some sense. I hope it made some people feel better. I hope I didn't upset some people by thinking that I don't believe that they're experiencing what they're experiencing. I believe you. I just don't believe you're experiencing a disorder. I think you are a little under the weather, dealing with it, so to speak. And that you'll be fine, and that you just got to push through a little bit harder, which is fine. You'll make it. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Again, this podcast is brought to you by Sea and Land Fitness, your home of professional fitness. So head on over to www.sandlfit.com. That's www.sandlfit.com. Pick up some hats, pick up some shirts. We got watches, all kinds of stuff. Check it on out. We got Garmin, Sunto, whatever you need, man. And then also a big thank you to 511 Tactical, Thorne Supplements, and RDX Sports. Go over and check out the links in the description below. For some of them, you can get 10% off. I'm not going to tell you which one. Go check it out. And that is all I got for you. Later, honey badgers. Out.